दिन आने वाले हैं, promised Narendra Modi during his high voltage electoral campaign. But 9 months in office, has the promise been delivered? Does the Modi Sarkar owe a lot of it to good fortune, or is it really good governance? Inflation has definitely cooled off, the subsidy burden is a lot lower, meeting the deficit of course looks a lot easier now. But that is all on account of a sharp correction in global crude and also food prices.
Files are moving faster. The talk is positive. Make in India is a great campaign, but the investment cycle has still not kick-started. The stock market has been on steroids, but is it the Modi magic or a world flushed with liquidity and nowhere else to go? So is this a case of Achhe Din or Achhe Sitaare for the Modi Sarkar? That's the budget debate tonight, and we've got a very special panel joining in. Swaminathan, Aiyar, Mythili, Bhusnurmath, N.K. Singh and Dr. Ajit Ranade. Swami, I have to start with you since you coined the term Achhe Din or Achhe Sitaare. What's your verdict?
Well, I suppose Modi or a good astrologer would argue that if I have brought you Achhe Sitaare, surely I have brought you Achhe Din also. That the two are not in contradiction. I'd merely say this, that if you say how much of the Achhe Din can be attributed to the Sitaare and how much can be attributed to actual action by the government, I would say at least 80-20. I mean, it's not that it's 100% that Modi has done nothing at all. There is a lot of action you find in the various ministries. There's enthusiasm. They're trying to do this. They're trying to clear this faster. This clearance is coming. That man is doing this. The coal auctions are going on, which is actually one positive thing. So some things have been done by Modi. At the same time, without doubt, when you say what is the biggest thing that has happened, the answer is inflation has come down. The price of oil has come down. Because the price of oil came down, it was possible to so-called deregulate diesel. It's not really deregulated, if you ask me. They're still very much controlling the price. But yes, the big subsidy of that has gone. Not only is the price of oil is down, various other commodity prices are down. This has tamed agricultural inflation in general. Edible oil prices are down. So I said, this is a very favorable combination which has simultaneously helped to bring down the fiscal deficit, has brought down the current account deficit to probably less than 1% of GDP, and has tamed inflation. I mean, wholesale price inflation at 0%. You might say, what better combination could there be? And frankly, there can't be. I'd merely say that it remains a matter of concern that we had all these 7 lakh crore worth of projects kicked off apparently by various people. Prakash Javadekar says absolutely everything has been cleared. And yet there is no boom in orders for construction or machinery, and this remains a source of major worry.
Let me take a cue from the crude oil prices that has been spoken about. Dr. Ranade, if I may ask you, that has changed the budget arithmetic considerably. The question, though, I'm asking you is that would the budget mathematics have been a lot different if crude oil prices were at $110 per barrel and not, $60 per barrel like they are right now?
It's like a huge stimulus to the economy, but unlike a fiscal stimulus, this has no side effects. That is, it's not inflationary. It doesn't cause interest rates to go up. It is not crowding out private investment. So this is a great stimulus. As Swami said, it helps the fiscal deficit, it helps the current account deficit, it helps inflation. Now, the creative challenge is not to fritter it away in the sense that you have to decide on the balance how much of this, which I estimate about 1 lakh crore of benefit, how much of it will go directly towards infrastructure spending, how much of it will go to give some relief to the oil marketing companies, and how much of it will go to the end consumer at the retail pumps. Now, this is a creative exercise, but that is for the finance minister to decide. But I think this is a great gift, and it does help the budget process a great deal.
That's the point, isn't it, Mr. Singh? Would you concede that the crude meltdown is the single biggest factor that's making the economy look a lot better than what it actually is?
No, of course, I think it's an important factor. I slightly disagree with Swami when he says it's 80-20. I would have really given the marks as 55-45, if not 50-50, because I think that Swami himself concedes that below the radar, a lot of initiatives are underway, which is not being really finding place in the public domain. I will really go to see the Make in India campaign. I mean, the number of initiatives which are underway, if you go through that list, which is not being publicized, is an enormous set of initiatives. I mean, Swami himself said that, for instance, The coal auction has already raked in 100,000 crore. This money was therefore embedded in the system. Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad told me day before yesterday that for the spectrum auctions, which are likely to begin in March, he expects again a huge multiplier like 60 to 80,000 crore plus. So I think that these are very positive steps into moving towards a combination of greater transparency, a more creative cycle in terms of fiscal management, in terms of empowering the states, because the bulk of the gains on coal are going to the states. I mean, particularly states like Madhya Pradesh and Orissa have a huge amount of multiplier gains from these coal auctions. So I think that the number of initiatives which have been taken are also formidable. And it is, of course, the government is quite sanguine for a combination of exogenous and endogenous factors to reach the daunting target of 4.1% of GDP, and of course take on an even more ambitious target for next year.
Mythili, if I may throw this to you, 9 months into governance, are we being a little impatient here? After all, files are moving faster. They may not be converting to action on the ground, but just to be the devil's advocate, is corporate India, our stakeholders in Indian economy being a tad too impatient here?
I would think so, because 9 months out of a total of 60 is a very minuscule amount. It's too early to judge the government. And as far as this government being lucky, yes, it has been lucky on many counts. Not just the oil. Even the monsoon turned out to be better than what everybody was fearing, a very severely adverse monsoon. But finally, what we got was not so bad. But let's also not forget that fortune always favors the brave. So unless the government had cashed in on the opportunity, yes, take the instance of high food inflation. Unless the government had offloaded from its stocks, food prices would not have come down. UPA too sat on those stocks. They just did not do anything about it. So if the government has benefited in some way, it has also had the courage to do things, similarly in the case of subsidies. And let's not forget that the UPA 1 had things going much, much better for it, because almost everything, that was the time of the great moderation. Fiscal deficit was under control, inflation was low, growth was high, but UPA 1 completely squandered that opportunity. It went on a big binge just before 2008 elections, saying actually it was a stimulus meant to save the economy from the Lehman crisis. In fact, they completely squandered that opportunity. So let's not forget that if you are lucky, it's because you utilize the opportunity, and sometimes you have ups and sometimes you have downs. The idea is to cash in on the ups and minimize the downs, and that I think this government has done. So let's wait, give them a little more time before we pass judgment on them.
Let's be patient. Fortune favors the brave, says Mythili. But Swami, isn't the impatience justified? You know, corporate India, which has been one of the biggest supporters of Prime Minister Modi and of this government, is actually getting impatient. Look at what Deepak Parekh had to say just last week. And if I were to quote him, after 9 months, there is a little bit of impatience creeping in as to why no changes are happening at the ground level. Why is it taking so long for the government steps to have any effect on the ground? Impatience is there.
Impatience is there, and I would say rightly so. There was this doing business reforms that Modi had launched. Mr. Amitabh Kant, Secretary of the DIPP, had created this enormous, long, huge matrix. Many of those things were supposed to be done by December 31st. In other words, it's not entirely in the future. There was a grim program of how things were supposed to be made faster and easier. Some of those deadlines have passed. So while Mythili is right in saying that, you know, okay, some things take time, some other things were supposed to have already been done. When the people who are most positively inclined to Modi are complaining about this, it is a matter of concern. I would say it goes beyond that. The notion that all that was wrong at the central government level, I think was a mistake. I think there are the reasons why the economy was getting stuck up at all kinds of issues at state government levels, at the court levels, at the NGO activist levels, at all these levels. And whatever Modi may be doing through grand announcements, it has not addressed, and perhaps to some extent cannot address, this totality of what is happening everywhere. From my point of view, we still don't have a really good grasp as to which are the binding constraints. Is it land? Is it the infrastructure? Is the companies are bust? Banks are refusing to lend? Is it the environmental issue? Is it the Supreme Court coming in? Is it the NGOs? Is it the agitations? You know, there are all these different levels put together. I don't think we have any clear handle of all these things, which is the real thing, which is holding it up. and merely to say make in India, and a few other slogans, and Mr. Amitabh Kant produces a large matrix of making. I mean, this is not grasping the entirety of issues. I am worried that there are issues beyond just what can be done by the Department of Industrial Production. Obviously, the land acquisition is something in which they are attempting to go ahead. But it remains to me a state of worry. I will, however, add that the CMIE has this particular index on investment intentions, which shows, frankly, a huge jump. It's not a small jump. It's a very big jump. So arguably, the mood is positive. People are getting ready, provided some of these things on the ground are sorted out. Maybe within the next 12 months, we do get a big jump upward. Too early to say for sure, but there are at least some favourable winds.
Fair point indeed. On that note of favourable winds, I want to actually take it across to Mr. N.K. Singh. Mr. Singh, if I may begin by talking to you about the good friends of Prime Minister Modi that Swami referred to, and they are getting impatient. The question is actually double-edged. Is the impatience justified, and do you also believe the government should have met the deadlines that were spoken about a lot earlier than they have actually, or they will?
Well, actually, I think that I don't know what good friends, because I think that shortly after Deepak spoke, it couldn't have pleased him very much that Aditya Puri, in that very same function, took the opposite view. And if you took a broad spectrum of the view of corporate India, you'll find that far more people are in tune with Aditya Puri's view that there has been significant change in not only the sentiment, that they are seeing significant changes and movement taking place in these stranded assets being at long last being brought to life and beginning to see the implementation of that. I think that a lot more progress will become visible as some of these efforts which are underway. By the Prime Minister himself, I mean, I agree with Swami that there are issues which go far beyond what the Ministry of Industrial Development under Amitabh Kant can do, or what Sundeshri Khullar can, for the Niti Aayog, put together on behalf of the other infrastructure ministries. It's the coordination is being done. A lot of this is being done under the initiative of Mr. Jaitley and the Prime Minister himself. So I really believe that there is far more tangible progress which is taking place than is evident so far. Right. And the coming months, these positive changes would begin to unfold themselves in an exceedingly significant way. And I do not agree with Mr. Deepak Parikh's one-off anecdotal evidence, because the preponderance of evidence appears to be that there has been fairly significant changes in not only the mood and the sentiment, but in terms of some of the important ground-level realities.
Sure. Let's toss this to the one panelist we have who has a pulse of the economy and also a sense of the mood of corporate India. Dr. Ranade, obviously the mood has changed. There's been a sea change in mood, and I think no one in the panel is going to dispute that. But do you think, sitting at your vantage point, have things really changed on the ground? What's the sense that you get from your conversations with corporate leaders?
Sandeep, just two quick little anecdotal sort of comment. One is I'm reminded of how this is actually the time when the corporate employees get reviewed, performance review. And there's always this discussion of how much of this performance is due to external factors and how much is due to their own effort. So I'm not, it's kind of amusing to see the same argument being used in the Prime Minister's case. And, ultimately it's a combination of both. Second is an analogy to a pot of boiling water. You take a cold water in a pot, put it on the stove, and you start the burner. For a long time, you don't see anything, and then you see small bubbles here and there. But all this while, the temperature is building up, and suddenly everything comes to a boil. So I think, I think a lot of things are happening below the radar. That's for sure. And like Mr. Singh said, perhaps it's not getting enough play, but that is also the government's responsibility to give it enough PR and enough information should flow out. But let me point out one of the big reasons why big projects are not coming on, because of the stress in the banking sector. Let's not forget that the banking sector combination of NPAs and stressed assets is a very huge number, 10% or maybe higher. And a lot of those assets are such, like for example, power sector, the entire asset is in place, but it's not generating any revenue because of coal problems, availability of coal. So this is unlike the case of the NPS during 97, 98, when actually you had a real problem with the assets were not built. This time the assets are there. So we need to give them, I would say something like 6 to 9 months so that the revenues can start generating. And so this will need some regulatory indulgence, regulatory forbearance. This will need some support from the government. And once you take care of these assets, then the banking sector can start credit in a big way. So right. I think there is a big problem from the banking sector. But I do feel, the big assets that the government has and the Prime Minister Modi has is the oil gift and the huge goodwill that he still enjoys, and the fact that the stock markets are, still very upbeat.
Right.
But he needs to look at the banking sector very carefully, I think.
Banking sector is one area of focus. We'll take a quick break on that note. When we come back, we'll get down to specifics. We'll talk about some of the key projects that have kicked off, the kind of response that is generated. Back in a moment with lots more on the budget debate.
Great to be back with you once again on budget debate, and let's throw this across to Mythili Bhusnurmath here. Mythili, the Prime Minister has given some smart slogans: Make in India, Swachh Bharat, Digital India. Do you believe this is political rhetoric of sorts? Actually, not political, but do you believe this is rhetoric of sorts? Because this is re-christening of a lot of policies that actually did exist in UPA too.
Well, absolutely. It might be old wine in new bottles, but it is very important in a democracy to sell your program, to get people on board. And to that extent, I think if he makes people feel that the government has a larger vision, the Prime Minister has a vision for India, and he's very committed to that, it makes a huge difference. And talking about the fact that the government has not adhered to the deadlines, let's not forget that it's very difficult in many programs to adhere to deadlines. And while you have a large vision, it's also important to work on the plumbing. And that's what the government has been doing. I've been a critic of the Jan Dhan Yojana from the bank's perspective, but from the government's perspective, the fact is that you now have a mechanism to do that DBT, and that's going to save you a huge amount by way of subsidies. Food subsidies particularly, a lot of your grants which you gift, old age pensions, scholarships. So this is the plumbing that the government is working on, and you cannot expect miracles overnight. So it's important to keep doing the nitty-gritty, the small little nuts and bolts of things, and as long as you do that, things like e-biz, things like Digital India, these are all things which are the nuts and bolts, and they will one day come to a fruition. This is not to say that everything that the government is doing right, but they are doing a lot of things to address both the big picture as well as the nitty-gritty, and as long as both work in tandem, I think we need to give them a little bit more time.
That puts a spotlight on the budget then, Mr. Singh. We've seen some sort of a policy roadmap that's been laid out by the Prime Minister himself. What are his policy priorities is now pretty evidently clear. But many believe that, enough detailing hasn't happened, whether it's Digital India, whether it's Make in India, for instance. We still don't have enough fiscal incentives for the manufacturing sector. Is it critical then that the budget provides the kind of detailing that's needed for some of these policies to really take off?
Well, I think, yes, certainly in some large measure, yes. But I think that the budget is, if you see the budget in the proper context, and certainly apart from being an accounting statement, it has increasingly become a statement of economic policy and the government's medium-term vision. And the first and foremost, I believe that what the budget must do, what the budget is expected to do. It must lay down the broad contours of the government's important economic policy during the current fiscal year and, of course, a medium-term view.
I just want to take a break away from expenditure and suggestions, and Swami, throw this to you. We have seen the spectrum auctions that have been slated, and of course the coal block auctions that are just about being concluded. Revenue maximization seems to be the big aim, especially in the case of spectrum. The TRAI suggestions, which is actually the regulatory body and where they have technical experts, those suggestions have been junked. The government has gone in for revenue maximization. The same has happened for coal auctions as well. Are you a little worried with this approach? It may fill in the government's coffers, but could it actually put the corporate India and its balance sheets in jeopardy?
I'm worried not just about the corporate balance sheets, but what you're doing in terms of creating a higher cost economy. I mean, if you really want to just raise revenue, why don't we just put a 20 rupee fee on every single bank transaction? Why don't you just say every car that travels on the road, every vehicle? There are some very easy ways of just raising revenue. The question is, what are you trying to achieve by auctioning these? From my point of view, if you had a revenue sharing deal, I think that would have been a much better way on which to bid. That way you would be having competition without necessarily raising prices sky high. On the issue of spectrum, my friend T.K. Arun keeps pointing out that there are new technologies which make it possible to have such a widespread sharing that you can almost make the use of telecom spectrum free, just as you make the use of roads free, and maximize the utilization of it. I mean, at the end of it all, what you want is economic activity rather than just that much more. If you want to extract some more money from telephone calls, I mean, you just put a tax on all telephone calls. I mean, you'll raise all the money that you need instead of focusing it on the new spectrum. So I said, yes, I would say that, you need to get away from maximization to what appears to be an efficient use of resources which maximizes the numbers of people who can utilize it, and therefore it increases efficiency and brings down logistical costs in the economy. That should be the strategy.
So clearly telecom policy goes down as one of the misses of this government in its first 9 months. But let's look at where the government has moved. Dr. Ranade, it's moved on FDI caps in insurance. It's moved on land acquisition norms as well through the ordinance route. Are you okay with that?
Well, on land, as you know, there's been a lot of criticism, and I believe that some kind of a modification is required. But remember, on all this case, things about the clearance and approval delays, which were flagged, by the way, a long time ago by the RBI in its annual report. It's not as if corporate India is asking for fewer approvals and fewer. It's just that the process, a developed economy also has hundreds of requirements on the environment front, on various other regulatory requirements. We just want predictability and fast clearances, the speed and predictability. I don't think anybody is asking for exceptions and exemptions. It's just that all this regulatory stuff should be much faster and much more predictable, much more stable. So on that front, I think that's connected to the ease of doing business, and the Prime Minister has a goal, ambition to get to the top 50 in the world. But again, to reiterate, it's about actually getting faster and predictable policy.
Start with the last round of questions, and I'm going to start with you in this round. Do you believe the government has done enough with the political capital? It has 282 members at the Allies 363. He's the 6th finance minister in liberalized India and the only one who enjoys majority. Have they leveraged it enough in the last 9 months?
Well, Supriya forgot that they have a majority in the lower house, a good majority, but what about the upper house? And the fact is that many of the legislations require the upper house concurrence as well. So as far as executive decisions are concerned, yes, this government has acted fast enough. But on things like GST, a constitutional amendment cannot be passed in a joint session. Ordinance route, so I think this government has tried, and I think they need cooperation from the opposition. Yes, it's fair enough to say that this party, where the BJP, when it was in opposition, it did not cooperate either. But the fact is that they have tried, they have shown more spine, more gumption than the previous Congress government, and to that extent I think they do need some kind of cooperation, across the board, cooperation from both the opposition as well as the government to take forward those legislations that are in the country's interest. So yes, they could do more, but that requires, both hands are required to clap, frankly.
Right. Mr. Singh, do you think the big challenge now for the finance minister is going to be to manage expectations as well, and the burden of expectations, do you think that's going to weigh him down as he rises to present what will be his first full budget?
Well, I think that yes, not only managing expectations, but aligning expectations to what can be realistically expected. Because I don't think that it's an exaggeration to say that budget is no panacea to all our economic malaise. Economic policy making and decisions must be taken round the year as and when it is needed. The budget is an important occasion, but to hang all our economic policy hopes on the announcements on just one budget day, apart from, of course, changes in expenditure, taxation, and some of the matters which Swami referred to, I think that one shouldn't really expect that all India's economic malaise are just about to be solved by some announcements on the 28th. This is an unfortunate part that in pre-1991 era, budget was primarily an accounting statement, thanks to the insistence of multilateral agencies. And I was in the Ministry of Finance when they were making certain announcements in the budget a precondition for access to their resources. Budgets have increasingly become a policy statement, but one mustn't really begin to attribute to the budget an excessive degree of importance in replacement of the continuing policy-making decision which the government needs round the year.
Swami, I have a question for you as I throw it to Sandeep to wrap the show, but the very quick question is that the winter session saw a complete washout. The budget session is where a lot of bills, 18 ordinances, are up for the approval from Parliament. Will you expect a more amicable government approach? Will you expect Prime Minister Modi to reach out far more to the opposition than he has? Or will this be seen as a sign of weak government, so to say?
I will see some, without doubt, some attempt by Modi to reach out. The question is, will the other side reciprocate? There was at least one statement made by somebody saying gleefully after the Delhi election, we are going to shout down everything for 2 years. I don't know if this will actually be followed out, but there is a precedent for this kind of thing to happen. And they could say, well, now that we've got this guy on the back foot, look what happened in the Delhi election, don't give an inch. Or extract a pound of flesh, a lot of humiliation, and then we give you an inch or two. So I am not sure what's going to happen. I would add that there's one positive thing from the point of view of the BJP. Is that the Congress numbers are so pathetically small that there is, and there's a demoralization within their ranks, that perhaps the idea that, if only we give one more dhakka, we can knock this particular house over, there is none of that sense of enthusiasm within the Congress party. I think also within the Rajya Sabha, there is scope for negotiations with lots of other parties other than the Congress. You don't necessarily need the Congress. If you get the other parties along with you, you can get to that halfway mark. So it's going to be a much, much more sophisticated exercise in terms of trying to win over things. It's not just a question of, will Sonia Gandhi negotiate? Even if she is not willing to negotiate in some issues, with luck, with experience, with finesse, you will be able to overcome some of those hurdles. So there's going to be a lot of very, very high-powered diplomacy at work. Let's see how good Modi is at this kind of stuff.
Dr. Ranade, let you have the last word on this then. Swami says 80% of the Achhe Din is because of Achhe Sitaare. Mr. Singh obviously disagrees with that. He says it's 50-50. What's your view and how hopeful are you that whether Achhe Din or Achhe Sitaare, we're going to have an Achha budget to start with?
Swami, I'm going to differ with you. On balance, I'm much more with Mr. Singh on the Achhe Din and Achhe Sitaare. I come from the corporate sector where we always evaluate for corporate performance. So external factors, internal factors are discussed all the time. Expectations management. That's what the budget speech has become. But this is a great opportunity, and we're all looking forward to the budget.
All right, as we all look forward to that big budget that is in the making, thanks each one of you for being with us, completely timed out on this edition of the budget debate. The verdict from our panel really is that the talk is all very positive, it's all very good, but action needs to now resonate on the ground. Good fortune does favor the brave, but remember, good luck doesn't last forever.
Thanks for watching this special telecast of the budget debate, and keep it with ET Now for all the budget-related coverage. Thanks for watching.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.